So now we're in the final 3 weeks of season 5 filming, and we're going to talk about the behind the scenes this week, and there are some really unique things that happened. Basically, all throughout this week, we're focusing entirely on the apostles and on Jesus in one room for one specific night. Of course, a lot of things are going to happen within this night, but it's one of the most important nights of all of Christianity. A lot of us throughout churches everywhere, right? We celebrate communion every single week. That's going to be initiated at the Last Supper. We're going to see a bunch of other things that play into this, and there are some hidden details that I think The Chosen is adding to this that are going to make it really unique. So let's jump into the season 5 behind the scenes from this week, and let's get into this because we're almost done with filming altogether. Here we go. So first off, we see Matthew. This is day 21 for Matthew. Paris will often track his own days as he's going through. I can imagine that he doesn't have more than maybe 25 or 26 days total for this season. So he probably has less than 10 days to go until he is done, would be my guess here. Now, we know that there's, at this point when he posted this, there's probably 15 to 14 days left in filming. At the end of this week, going into next week, there's only 10 days left of filming. So we are right there. Only 2 more weeks after this one, for sure. Now here, I'm going to show you some kind of catch up behind the scenes from the Chosen series. Like I always say, they kind of post a little bit later than the other stuff. I think there's just time to process through the clips and to pick what they want to put as some short form content and different things like that. So here is Dallas actually talking to the group and them doing a group scene. We saw this previously on our behind the scenes, so you can go back and catch up on that if you want to see it. Not this exact clip, but this scene that they're filming is Judas talking to Jesus as they're walking through town. I believe this is right after Jesus has just flipped all the tables and cleansed the temple. And so that's what this scene is here.
He's going down the...
Yeah, he just had
so we're going that way and then he's going to... Okay, do you want to establish that?
So this is just a rehearsal here. And Simon the Zealot, Allah, says, do you want to establish the rock scene or... And this, he's actually talking about a blooper, basically something that happened earlier. He was doing a scene where he had to stand up from a staircase and kind of walk over, and he ended up tripping on a rock. Then he got mad, and he actually kicked the rock and ended up hurting his foot. And so now he's saying, do you want to establish basically where the rock was earlier? And it's basically a funny callback to a time that he tripped and then hurt himself. And they're going to show a little bit of that here.
I hope I don't have a trip on that.
So there he is. That's him kicking the rock and accidentally hitting his toe on the set. I'm sure that hurt really bad. There's definitely blood and some ice packs for sure.
I'm warning you.
Stay out of my way.
So you can see there the ice packs there for his foot. I'm sure that hurt real bad.
All right, here we play.
Master, I just...
You can see Jordan messing around there with with Austin. Of course, Jordan is always a class clown on set, it feels like. And of course, they're wearing sunglasses and stuff like that because it's just a rehearsal.
Where are you going?
So right at the end of that clip, we hear Simon say, where are you going? Because Jesus is going somewhere else than we've seen him previously, I guess.
It's almost even more.
So not too much to that clip, but it is interesting to see more and more of the sides of that and what's going on there. Here is Dallas now instructing Barnaby, who is basically talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious leaders here.
Of a dig that you're talking about them to her
Yeah.
in front of them.
That's great.
Yeah, so just indicate that towards her. It's like she's correcting you. It's like, what? Jesus said that about them. You know,
Perfect.
I know it stings a bit. Yeah.
We all have setbacks. They can be hard to swallow. But Jesus said, the tax collectors and prostitutes are entering the kingdom of heaven before them.
So that's a pretty interesting kind of setup there. We see that Barnaby shows us some of the teachings that Jesus has been saying during season 5, and that is the teaching where Jesus says that the tax collectors and the sinners will enter the kingdom of heaven before the religious leaders because of what they've said, right? This is kind of echoing what we've seen earlier on with, for example, Matthew chapter 21, where we see, or is it John chapter 21? I think it might be John. Anyway, where we see Jesus talking about the 7 woes to the Pharisees and all of the stuff that's happening there. And so there's a lot of stuff that that Jesus is very hard on with the leaders of the religious people. So here's another example of that for sure.
I know, it stings a bit, but you'll get over it.
So here's another scene here. I do believe this is part of an actual scene for The Chosen, but here they kind of played a joke on George Xanthus, who plays John here. So they scare him on purpose there, and he just goes along with it and plays out the rest of the scene. But just a funny moment behind the scenes where everybody kind of set up this scare moment in order to scare George. Now, of course, this is the house that they were in previously as well. The house that we don't know who the owner is, but of course, this is their new sort of mission house out of Jerusalem where they're kind of doing all their work here. Now, you'll notice if you watched last week that I'm skipping day 46. We will come back to day 46. Last week was through day 45 or day 55. Now we're on day 57 because we're going to skip 56 for now. We're going to talk about this week, which the entire week was focused on the Last Supper. Okay. This entire week, they've been focused on different parts of it kind of going through. Now, this first section, you can kind of immediately see what they may be setting up for here. If you don't know what kind of happened through the Last Supper, there's different parts of it that kind of were big, right? It's not just the eating of the food. It's not just calling out Judas as a betrayer, right? And what's going to happen there. It's not just the Eucharist or the communion, right? There's a lot more to it throughout the night that actually happens. There's a lot of elements that happen here. First off, how they found the house, which we talked about a little bit last week. We saw the precursor to that, and actually Simon or Peter being sent out in order to find this house, in order to get this house. Now we're seeing that they have the room after last week, in day 55, seeing it set up a little bit. Then here, day 57, we're in the midst of it. We're beginning to film what is actually happening here as they're getting into the Last Supper. Now, I believe they're filming all of this chronologically now as they have the room and they're kind of going through it piece by piece. I don't think they're skipping around so much. So as we go throughout this week, you're going to see the evolution of this room and what's going to be happening here for this long scene. At least I think it's going to be a long scene. It might be, cut up into a lot of different pieces. Who knows? But here it is here, day 57. So there in the back, we see Jesus, obviously, sitting down, preparing for something there. Now, you could probably tell what that is if you know what's going on with the Last Supper. We'll talk about it in just a second.
It has to cross the hemisphere, the northern hemisphere.
Now, as we pan around the room, I think Dallas is showing us a couple of things very intentionally. Of course, he's showing us the framing of the camera and kind of what's going on there. He's showing Jonathan that's sitting there in the camera's view. Also, to the right over here, there is someone who is standing in the shadows. Now, this will come back at the very end. I just want you to remember this. This person right here does not seem to be one of the apostles. This seems to be someone who's much younger. I could be wrong about this, and I could be misreading this. So let me know if you think that's the case. This looks like someone who is in costume, someone who resembles someone that we saw last week, and also seems to be much younger. You can see on their chin, they don't have a beard or anything, as far as I can tell. And so it's, again, hard to see, but from my very biased take here, I do think this is going to be someone important, and we're going to talk about him in just a second. So hold on to your hats on that one. We'll get back to him in just a little bit. But let's keep going.
Pacific Oceans. We have to, when you say it, it just comes in reverse. It's like the...
So here we see, again, a little blurry shot here of the Last Supper. You can also see all the stuff on the table, which we'll talk about in a bit, but you're going to see all different types of food and different things from that time period and from the Passover in general that people still celebrate today.
All right, here we go, guys.
So just getting the giggles on set. I'm sure this is a common thing, especially with those 13 guys right there. Beautiful sunset. Now, this is one of the most important pieces that we got from Dallas this week. This is the washing of the feet. This is hugely important, right? Not only because this is such a massive moment just in the Gospels in general, but overall, this is such a big deal because it's not just Peter, right? It's not just Andrew. It's not just Nathaniel. It's not just Big James. It's not just John, which Jesus washes their feet. He also washes Judas's feet here. As we jump into this, we see that Jesus washes their feet. So now before the Feast of the Passover, so that was what they're about to go into, basically, right before the Last Supper, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now remember, this is the last line that Jesus actually says during the end of season 4, okay, leading into this time period, leading into Holy Week, okay? During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Now, this is going to be one of the most amazing scenes, I think. This may be my favorite scene in all of the Chosen period, but definitely the Chosen season 5. I could imagine this being my favorite scene. So let's talk about washing feet real fast. Why is this such a big deal for the Jewish people? Well, one, you don't really want to do anything unclean, right? This is kind of a thing where washing feet is not going to make you, I don't think, ceremonially unclean. It might, but the overall thing is that, like, you're about to eat dinner, you don't want to be dirty, period. Not that they were like super wary of germs and things because they didn't know germs existed. But this thing would also, less on the side of being dirty. It's way more important that Jesus is doing this because this is a hugely humble thing to do. Normally someone of status, someone who is leading the supper, which is what Jesus is doing here during the Last Supper, someone who is obviously the leader of the group, the rabbi of the group, right? Not only that, but they all know that he is the Messiah at this point. So this person would never be seen in as low a position like that. Never, ever, right? If you go to someone's house, the person that's going to be washing your feet is almost certainly a servant or a slave, okay? This is the lowliest of lowly positions that you could possibly be in within a dinner party, okay? So Jesus, being the one who gets up on his own accord and decides to do this for the group, this shows you where he is, that he will love them and he will love them to the end. And that includes Judas. Even though he knows that Judas is about to betray him, even though he knows that these guys, Peter, for example, is about to deny him 3 times, there are so many things that Jesus, like so many reasons why Jesus did not have to do this, but he chose to, right? And so within this, it's like, it's such an interesting frame, right? Where we go from the beginning of the supper as Jesus is washing Judas's feet to the end of the supper where he says, go and do what you must. So it's such an interesting storytelling moment here. So many layers to this with Peter, with Judas, with all the rest of them, right? These are imperfect people who are now being washed by the King of the universe. It's such a humbling moment here. And so let's read through this. Peter said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Because again, to him, this is broken. This is disgusting. This is not right. And so he's very much against it. He says, if I do not wash you, you will have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only then, but also my hands and my head. Wash all of me. And Jesus said to him, to one who has bathed does not need to wash, except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you. So this is, of course, leading towards Judas. Not every one of you are clean, kind of, alluding to not every one of you is one of us, basically. For he knew who was to betray him. That's why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord. You are right, for so am I, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should also do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now, before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. So again, this is reminiscent of later on in John chapter 17, the high priestly prayer, where Jesus is saying that there is a lineage here, right? The people that Jesus has are connected to him. And because they're connected to him, they are connected to the Father, because he and the Father are one, right? And so it's a really, really interesting section here. But remember, all of this is done, right, to show who Judas is. And I think to reach out to Judas in a way, almost, right? This is Jesus being like, not all of you are clean. Let me clean you, right? And we see that all throughout The Chosen, especially in season 4. And I think we're going to see it immensely in season 5, where Jesus has not given up on Judas, right? Jesus has not said, okay, you do what you're going to do. I denounce you, like, get out of here. I don't want you to be part of this group anymore. That's not what Jesus does. In fact, he brings him closer and closer and closer, trying to show him the type of person that he is. So when we see this, going on in season 5, it's not just the foot of a fisherman, but it's the foot of a zealot. It's the foot of a tax collector. It's the foot of a betrayer. And so that's why this moment is so important. That's why I'm looking forward to this moment. I think more than any other moment in The Chosen season 5, I'm really, really excited for where they're going to take this. So we'll have to see. Now moving on, we've got a little bit of a picture of Sam Jenkins and Dallas Jenkins standing side by side. Sam has been part of the team for a couple of years now, as he's been, helping out the team and making sure that, they're all doing what they need to do. Sam has been a big part of the team since he graduated college, and now this is what he does. He works alongside his dad, which is really, really cool. Sam is also working on his own projects on the side. Maybe we'll talk about those one day. But yeah, really, really cool guy. Again, day 22 of the Matthew days. And now we're seeing our first small clip of the actual Last Supper here. We can talk about the order that they're sitting in as well in just a second. As you can see in this shot, though, we've got John to the left side, and then we've got Judas to the right.
He had brought us out from Egypt, and not carried out judgments against them.
So John here is speaking of the Exodus. So this is Passover. Passover, if you don't know, is a celebration of the Exodus. So whenever the angel of death passed over the Jews and then went into the Egyptians and killed their firstborn, right? This is what Passover comes from. That's why it's called Passover. And so talking about the Exodus of the Jews here, we see that John is actually quoting some of that scripture, talking about some of that story, talking about how God cast judgment onto the Egyptians during that time. So interesting stuff. We're seeing a little bit of that. I think this is going to be reminiscent of what we saw in season 4 with the storytelling, just without the acting out of the different things. I think we're going to see a lot of the storytelling of Passover throughout this time as well. I can imagine that this scene in particular, this Last Supper in particular, could be an entire episode on its own, with the washing of the feet, talking about Passover and learning about that. We also see, of course, the Eucharist and everything that's happening with that. We then see the betrayal of Judas and how he goes on to leave the supper and to go do that. There's a lot of really key moments in this Last Supper that could basically take up an entire episode. So we'll see if they do that or not. Yep. See, we got a little bit of behind the scenes of the hot set here. A lot is happening behind this door. I think this is I believe this is the door to the synagogue. I can't remember right now. I think it is. I think this is the door to the synagogue. But I think they're teasing this because, like we said previously, we believe that Nicodemus is coming back. So I believe Nicodemus would be in the synagogue, talking at this time. So, yeah. Again, day 23 of the Matthew days. Now we're on day 59. Now you can see quickly, again, we're continuing that idea of the foot washing here. Look at everybody's feet. Throughout every scene we've seen them previously, normally they would be wearing shoes. However, it was common at a very nice dinner, and especially festivals and things like this, for someone to wash your feet, for a servant or someone else to wash your feet. Definitely not the master of the house like we're seeing with Jesus. But here we're seeing everybody's feet are bare. And then we're going to continue to see some more evidence of this in just a second.
It's going to go on the floor,
So if we look right over here, we see Andrew, who is sitting at the side of the table over here. And then on the floor, we see a basin of water as well as a towel. So this is the basin and the towel that Jesus will use to wash their feet. You can see that his feet also are uncovered as we go through this. So that's day 59.
So I definitely...
Now here is when a shoot goes well and we can move on. So this is getting to the end of the Last Supper, I believe. But again, you can see more of the table here. I'll kind of go over the structure of the table. Again, this is a triclinium. We've talked about this previously. A triclinium is a very Roman thing that happened during the time, but this would have been very common throughout all of the Roman-controlled areas, including the Middle East. The thing that is wrong with this picture, however, is the chairs. I don't think that they would have chairs. Generally, with a triclinium, even in Roman, aspects, we would see a large couch behind here that they would all be leaning on. That's why whenever the Bible talks about them reclining at table, that's what they would actually be doing. They would be reclining at the table. They would be reclining on a couch, leaning on each other. That's why John, for example, was leaning on Christ during the Last Supper. There's a lot of things that would be a little bit different, I think, than this triclinium here. Also, Jesus is probably sitting in the wrong spot. I think that they wanted to do this because they wanted to have a little bit more centered of a shot for Jesus to have John on one side, Judas on the other, and just them alone. It makes for a really good cinematic viewing. We don't know this from scripture, so it's fine that they changed what we think traditionally would have happened. However, traditionally, we would probably see Jesus on one side, which I'll show you in a second, and then we would see the guests on the other two sides. Jesus having his basically closest family or closest people kind of near him. We do understand that John and Judas most likely would have been on either side of him, though. So we'll go over that in just a second, but let's continue on.
All right, go again.
One more.
So there they are, going again one more time after celebrating that they were done. Really interesting stuff. And then day 60, which is our last day of filming for the week, we see a bunch of the stuff that was on the table. Now, obviously, a lot of this food is probably half real, half fake, half edible, half not, as some movie magic we go through. But we see a bunch of different stuff, including lamb, obviously. We see dates and olives. The unleavened bread right there, which is kind of like a cracker type texture.
You're not in the show, so I wouldn't.
We see the candles, which candles most likely weren't used. Most likely these would have all been oil lamps, as it was way more common during the day to use oil lamps than candles, especially in Israel.
That's all you are.
We see some mint, I believe, over there, and some grapes, and obviously wine in all of these cups. I'm not sure what that is there.
It is.
But really cool. So now we're going to go back a week. After talking about that, we're going to go back a week and talk about what I think is going to be a really interesting piece of season 5 if they do end up doing this, if I'm correct about this. So we're going to go back to the last day of last week, which was the introduction for us of the Last Supper. So we see this little scene here where we kind of pan over to the Last Supper, but there is a character who is standing in this area here. They're getting ready to shoot, getting ready to see this, and it looks like the Last Supper is like half ready, right? There's a whole bunch of cups and plates on the table. The tablecloth is being put on, right? There's a bunch of stuff happening there. But there's one character that's standing here over to the side. Hey, real quick, do you enjoy our videos like this where we talk about the future of The Chosen and talking about what's upcoming in The Chosen season 5, 6, and 7 and beyond? Then we're going to continue making videos like this, but oftentimes we're going to need your help. There are up seasons and down seasons to this whole YouTube thing. Whenever the new season of The Chosen comes out, it's very, very great for us. We can make a lot of videos and you guys love it. However, when there's not a lot of information coming out, it's pretty hard for us to continue making videos like this. So if you want to support us even through those times, the best way to do so is through our Patreon, snipesupport.com. You can just click that link in the description down below and it would really help us out. $5, $10, or $25 a month every month is really helpful to us, and you can cancel at any time. So if you want to join Patreon, the link is down in the description down below, and we'd love your help with that. Anyway, let's get back to the video. That's standing here over to the side.
Those flames are kind of crazy. They're crazy.
So we see this character here. Now, clearly it looks like this is a character that's actually in the shot. This is someone who is shorter than any of our apostles. Again, this character doesn't really seem to have any facial hair or anything like that. This looks like a younger character overall, maybe in his early teens, late teens, something like that, right? Probably early teens would be my guess of who this character is. Now, we never see their face. I think that's very intentional. Dallas is always very cheeky with his behind the scenes clips and what he adds here. However, we got a clip this week that makes me think pretty heavily on the theory side, at least, that this is maybe John Mark, the writer of the Gospel of Mark. Okay, let's talk about what we know about Mark before we go to this next clip. But we know that Mark was most likely a disciple of Peter. Okay, we know that he got probably most of his information from his gospel from all the apostles, but also Peter directly. John Mark is talked about between Paul and Barnabas and Peter, and there's some arguments that happened because of him. But there's a big theory early on with Mark that particularly his parents are the ones who give Jesus and the apostles the place for the Last Supper. This is a pretty long-standing tradition. There's no real biblical evidence of that. There are some tiny things that people will grasp at or say this could be Mark or this could be Mark's family. However, traditionally, there are some people that would definitely say that Mark's family is the one that has the upper room where they have the Last Supper. So this could be Mark setting up that upper room in order for him to be the guy that kind of, connects everything here. This could also be the connection point for where Mark first meets Peter. This could be a really, really good connection point there. Now, we don't know this for sure. Obviously, it's just a theory if this is Mark or not. It's also just a theory if Mark's parents were the ones that connected him here. Another theory that we have of Mark later on in the Gospels, actually later on this day, is whenever they're in the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus is arrested, there is in the Gospel of Mark this weird moment where there is a boy who runs away naked. Now, a lot of people have questioned this for a long time, but it is only in the Gospel of Mark. So that young man flees. It's a small section here, Mark 14, verse 51. And a young man followed him, but with nothing but a linen cloth around his body, and they seized him. But he left the linen cloth and ran away. Okay, so when they came to arrest Jesus, right? This is right after Peter cuts off the guy's ear. Jesus comes and he heals it and does everything. And then the young man flees. Okay, this is right before Jesus goes to Caiaphas and everybody else, right? So this is the only gospel that mentions this. So it's quite interesting that we see this in Mark's gospel in particular. I doubt we would see a young man running away naked in The Chosen. It just seems like not a very Chosen thing to do, although possible. We could see it. Anyway, so we see this moment here. This could be this boy here. Now, let's get to the clip that we saw this week that kind of put everything together for me. I'm going to play it first and just let you guess what the dialogue kind of says here. I'll make sure that it's high enough volume for you guys to hear. And then we'll jump into what I think this dialogue says and why I think it's important here.
Never underestimate that kid.
So that's the small clip that we got. that brought me to this conclusion. This is day 56, the first day of this week, really. And again, we're in the Last Supper room. We hear Peter say a piece of dialogue there. Let me rewind it a little bit so you can hear that again, okay? Here we go.
Never underestimate that kid.
So let me know in the comments what you think he said there. I'm going to let it breathe for a little bit so chat can maybe add it in. But let me know what you think is said there, because I'd love to know your thoughts. And I'll give it a couple more seconds and then we'll jump in there. No guesses quite yet. Was that Peter? I don't remember the story. Yep, that was Peter speaking there. So maybe that helps. No guesses. No guesses yet. All right, cool. Let's continue on then, and I'll show you exactly what I think he said here in day 56.
Never underestimate that kid.
So I think Peter is saying here, never underestimate that kid. And I think this is a super telling line, and I think Dallas did this on purpose, if I'm right about this, right? Never underestimate that kid is what I think he says. And so I think what he's saying is don't underestimate Mark. Why would this be like a kind of a nudge Easter egg in The Chosen Season 5? Because Peter is supposedly the one that actually trains Mark. He is the master, the rabbi of Mark. So it would make a lot of sense to have a little bit of a wink moment in Season 5 for Peter to defend Mark, or to kind of give him a little bit of props, leading to you know, him being a disciple of Peter and seeing that actually play out. It would be really interesting, no? I was not expecting that. I did not really expect to see Mark. I thought it was a possibility for Season 5, but this one clip right here definitely led me to believe, okay, I do think this is Mark. I do think this is Mark. Yeah, so anyway, that's my thoughts about that. I do have a few more clips to go through here, but that's my thought about Mark. I do think that he is going to be part of Season 5, a small part. I don't think he's going to be overwhelmingly like a part of Jesus's posse and stuff like that. I think he's going to be a witness to a lot of what happens this week, and that they're going to kind of like ping off him a little bit in order to maybe have him be part of Acts later on, or some different things like that, or at least introduce him here. So interesting stuff for sure. Let me know what you think about the comments. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Anyway, that's the rest of that. Now I wanted to show you a little bit of behind the scenes that we got on the Chosen app in particular. This is going to be really hard to hear in parts of it, so I'm going to crank up the volume a little bit and let you hear, because Dallas is the only one with a microphone here. Joey doesn't have one, so let's listen to this. This is a little bit of insider piece from on set where Dallas is kind of going through this scene with Joey in particular.
A little bit more engaged as opposed to defeated, because we've played that a lot. I think this is a little more engaged, you know, with the others, a little more processing with, not yelling, but just some.
Yeah, I don't actually believe that I don't think he's the Messiah. You know what
Correct.
I mean?
You do believe he's the
I
Messiah.
do. So I think saying it is kind of
Probably walk in with this.
strange. Like I like it, you know what I mean? I get what you're saying by less like, well, the world is over.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really hard to hear. I'll kind of explain what's going on. So Dallas is talking to Joey about Thomas's character, and he's saying, play it up a little bit more like you're engaged in this scene, less like you're emo Thomas, like we've been talking about previously. I think Dallas is also worried about Thomas coming off as just like super sad this entire season, and so he's trying to give him some depth and some moving here as he goes through what he's talking about. They're clarifying that Thomas does believe that Jesus is the Messiah. However, him talking about it and doing these things is hard for him because, you know, he's just gone through a lot within the last few weeks and months, right? But he's here because he promised Rhema that he would be here, and because he does truly believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So he is going to do this no matter what. However, it's very difficult for him. That's essentially what they're saying here. There's another small clip here that is really interesting. This is the scene with John and Jesus in particular in this new house that they're in, some sort of Roman house here, that has a lot of iconography of idols, and of course pagan gods. So right here, they're actually sitting in front of a statue of what looks to be Athena. And so we see Jesus and John actually talking about this imagery and how it's affecting them and what they think about it overall. But here's Dallas kind of talking about it behind the scenes here.
Maybe land on this as you start the sentence or somewhere there, but I do think we want to. No, it's whenever you say the line is fine. I'm just saying I do think we want to acknowledge everything.
I kind of looked here. If you want me to be a little more demonstrative about it, I can make it clear that I'm taking the whole statement.
Start with that, and then.
What? Well, First Commandment didn't exactly make it into this one, did it?
So he said, well, the first commandment didn't exactly make it into this one, did it? And of course, he's talking about there shall be no other gods before me. And so again, this is a really unique moment because we're not used to really seeing John and Jesus have these tiny moments all too often. We've gotten it before, right? Especially at the beginning of season 2. And then John has these moments with Jesus throughout because John is supposedly the closest one to Jesus in scripture, right? That's why he's sitting next to him at the Last Supper and some different things like that. But anyway, so we see this moment, this really interesting moment with John and Jesus where they're talking about this iconography, they're talking about this idolatry, and it's going to be interesting to see how they play that out or what they're trying to share there as Jesus is God, right? And how he connects to these other moments here throughout it. So anyway, that's our behind the scenes. I wanted to touch real fast as a last little piece about the triclinium and what's kind of going on here. And so this is basically an image of what the triclinium kind of is. This is for the Last Supper, of course. And so the triclinium in the Chosen, they have Jesus kind of sitting right here, right? And so we see Jesus sitting in the middle there with John on his right side and then Judas on his left. Then we have kind of going down the row to the right, we have Big James, Thomas, Little James, Andrew, and Peter. Now it's kind of important that Peter is actually in this last spot over here, as this would have been saved for an honored guest. Okay, within the understanding of how the triclinium seating goes, you would basically have the master of the house over here, where Jesus is to the left over here, in a normal triclinium. Then you would have a family member to your right, which would hold this kind of first position. This is like the closest one to the person that is having the dinner party. Okay, and so Jesus would be here, John would be here. Then this is I forget what it's called, but there's another name for this position over here with Judas in particular. This is also someone that's close to the leader of the party, essentially. And so Judas, they believe, was sitting over here. I think mostly why they believe that John and Judas were on either side of Jesus is because John leans on Jesus during the dinner party. So that makes sense that he would be sitting next to him. Then Judas would be next to him as well because he is the one that puts his hand into the drink with Jesus, right? That proves that Judas is the one that's going to betray him, essentially. Then we have the other ones, but in the Chosen we have, on the left side here, we've got Thaddeus, Nathaniel, Philip, Matthew, and then Simon Z. And so that's how it is in the Chosen so far from what we've seen, the behind-the-scenes clips and during this scene here. So it's much different than what the traditional view of the triclinium would have been, if that makes sense. And I think they are just doing this because it just helps for a better cinematic point of view to see the apostles on the right and left, then see Jesus in the middle, and then see Judas and John on either side. I think it makes a lot of sense to have it that way. So no hate there for sure. Just wanted to share a little bit of knowledge about what the triclinium is, and that it probably would be a little bit different than what we're seeing in the Chosen, although it's not a big deal there. So anyway, let me know in the comments below what you thought about the Chosen Season 5 behind the scenes. I'd love to hear your thoughts for sure. And check out the rest of the videos on our channel. And of course, all of our behind the scenes stuff, which I'm sure you'll love as well. So anyway, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.